Hey Breck students, Frank here from AFP with a pretty fun topic today that we're going to discuss on. We're going to talk about what makes the Beatles' harmony on Nowhere Man so enjoyable to listen to. If you've never heard Nowhere Man, or if you've never heard any Beatles song, or the Beatles in general, don't fret. Use this video as an introduction to why you should go out and listen to the Beatles. They're one of my favorite rock bands, and it's funny because I didn't get into listening to the Beatles until I was in high school. So I kind of come from this like really rock and roll pop music background because my mom, raised me on 80s music. But when I got into the Beatles is sort of the time period in my life where I kind of started to understand harmony and understand what being a part of the music means. But yes, if you've never heard the Beatles, some albums I'd like to recommend are Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Magical Mystery Tour, the White Album, Abbey Road. Just ideally, I would say listen to all of them, but the later work is my favorite because it really just shows how people could push the limits of technology and just what the sound was back then. It was the definition of the era, and that being the late '60s. But jumping right in it, "Nowhere Man" is a song off the album Rubber Soul, and in that period of the Beatles, of the Beatles' existence, they were at the top of their prime. They were touring all over the world. They had taken America by storm. Beatlemania was happening. And the thing that by then had made the Beatles so special was the fact that they were kind of this packaged gift to the world that was just had a bow tie on it. They were all very nicely well spoken, nicely dressed. They looked nice. They played very nice, and they sang with a character. When I mean a character, if you listen to the Beatles music a little more in depthly, and you kind of read the lyrics as you're listening to the music, you notice that Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and John Lennon all have very, very specific styles of writing music that all complement each other in a really creative and fun, organic way. I would say, and this is just my opinion, I feel like people have had a lot of say over the years on what's the style of their writing. I would say John Lennon is a very sarcastic and at times very dark songwriter. He has a lot of he has an aggression behind his music. Paul McCartney has this very happy and love inspired and sometimes a little bit whimsical style of writing music where it's just very cheery and you're walking down the street. A perfect example of that is Good Day Sunshine, because it's a song about just kind of just laughing things off, I'm gonna wake up this morning and walk down the street and it's a beautiful day and the sun has a face on it and it's shining at me. You kind of read these lyrics and you think, wow, I can see that in their faces. I can see that in their body language and the way they take the pictures on the album covers. George Harrison is this very mystical, kind of eye-opening songwriter whose lyrics go deeper than the other two songwriters' lyrics. It's just he writes about consciousness. And he was into Indian music, and that's where he was bringing those that side of Indian culture into the band and just kind of bringing that element. So that's one of the main things that to me makes the Beatles very special. And on a song like on a song like Nowhere Man, Nowhere Man is one of the songs that you can hear the three front Beatles, that being George Harrison, Paul McCartney, and John Lennon, singing together. I believe the song was written by John Lennon, and it's a song about exactly what the title is, like just not really, knowing where you belong, and knowing that like you don't have to rush for things because the world is at, like he says, the world is at your command. You don't have to really worry about it. He's a blind man. So it's really beautiful how they kind of all come together in harmony on the chorus. And if you've never heard the chorus, that's okay. I believe the chorus is, nowhere man, don't worry, take your time, don't hurry, leave it all till somebody else lends you a hand. And Paul and George are in the background going, ha, la, 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 la. George is, ha, la, 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 la. So just the way they kind of, like, you sing those parts on your own. Like, let's take a look at the verse. So John's part of the verse is, he's a real nowhere man, sitting in a nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. And it's the melody, it's straightforward. But then you go to Paul's part, and Paul is, he's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. Like, wow, like, that's beautiful, right? And then you have George on the bottom of the harmony. And this always takes me a second. He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. I'm a little sharp there, but like, just the combination of those lines together creates this beautiful choral experience in the main verses. And just to go off into this John kind of coming out of the verse into the chorus, just being like, nowhere man, don't worry, take your time, don't hurry. The melody kind of gives you this feeling of just reassurance, like as if you were the nowhere man and they're singing to you. And it's almost like if it's a theme song to a show, like one of those 60s or 70s shows, or it's like Reese Company, and it's like the guys walking down the street. It gives you a really deep picture through harmony and through the arrangement of the song, that this guy is helpless. This guy is completely alone. So I really appreciate the Beatles for that. I really love how, without necessarily telling you who this person is, just letting you know that he is a person that is alone and has no name and comes from nowhere. Through the use of chords, they do something to our emotions to make us like wander up a story and guess a story. And that's one of the things that I love about the Beatles. Another really good song is which involves some really good harmony is Sgt. Pepper, Lonely Hearts, or anything off of Sgt. Pepper really has some great parts. But like Getting Better, I've got to admit it's getting better. It can't get much worse. The song is about, feeling down and feeling low on yourself and just kind of shoving whatever bad day you're having off and just being like, well, you know what? I got to admit. And the way Paul McCartney sings that song, by the way, just to, reinstate, I know I jumped from Nowhere Man to Getting Better, 2 different periods of the Beatles, but just listen to the way they play on the notes of a song, and the way the lyrics play with the notes to make you feel like, wow, the situation's gonna get better, because what you got is Paul McCartney singing on this chorus, I got to admit it's getting better, a little better all the time. Into which John Lennon responds, it can't get much worse. And the harmony is, Gotta admit, it's getting better, better. So after Paul says better, it's like saying the word better. It's like better, like haha. Like using harmony against melody and doing small little tricks like that within music give the listener the emotion that they want out of the song. They kind of tell, without the use of lyricism, it tells the listener, oh my God, like this song's about overcoming something. Or Nowhere Man being a song about being alone and not necessarily having a title or having a place, that you would come from, like having a destination. You're just this wandering person. Some other great examples of harmony are a really famous example. Whoa. Hello, Goodbye. You say yes, I say no. You say stop, and I say go, go, go. Bunch of orchestral noises and electric guitar sounds, and then in the chorus it's you say goodbye and I say hello, into which John Lennon and George Harrison do this harmony going up the major scale. Hello, goodbye, hello, goodbye, hello, goodbye, hello, goodbye. It's just a play on the emotion of the song, and that's something that just made the Beatles so unique, because not only was their songs kind of giving you an insight to what they were talking about and what they were like, and when I say songs I mean the lyrics. Not only were the lyrics giving you like the information to your brain, like, oh, this is a song about greeting and saying and leaving people, but it's also a song about like the song's about disagreeing. The song's about not necessarily being on the same page. So it's like you say goodbye and I say hello, you say goodbye. And just, I guess, the confusion behind the mood of that song can really be heard through John and George doing that hello, goodbye, because it's like, which one do I choose? I really love that about the Beatles. I really think that's something special within their music. Help, the same thing, which is an earlier Beatles song. Help is the self-titled to their album Help. It's a self-titled track, and the song is about being in an emotional state of turmoil, just not being in the right place and feeling trapped and needing help from someone. And the lyrics, and you can hear that in John's lyrics. That's another John Lennon song, by the way. Hello, Goodbye was a Paul McCartney song. So the lyrics of Help are, I'm just going to give you a little snippet. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down, and I do appreciate you being round. Help me get my feet back off the ground. Won't you please, please help me? Paul McCartney, in that instance, in that same little snip, does the harmony. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down, and I do appreciate you being round. Help me get my feet back off the ground. Like that singing that note by itself, it doesn't really sound good. But when they came together, especially and no pun intended when saying "come together," that's another Beatles song. When they came together and they did those harmonies, specifically Paul and John, their voices complemented each other so well. Paul having this very choir-like, clean, voice without scratch. And I'm actually exaggerating when I say that. You can find many takes of Paul McCartney doing those vocal takes over and over again because his voice would give out. And John Lennon having this voice that's scratchy and raw. It doesn't really sound like it's warmed up. It's just like, And in the last video that I talked about recording, the Beatles, something that John Lennon was really famous for, other than his beautiful vocal harmony with Paul McCartney, he was famous for doubling his vocals because he didn't necessarily like his vocals. And you can hear this on Help. You can hear this on I Am the Walrus. It's just it became something that was like a complaint, and it turned into a happy like not necessarily a happy accident, but like, once they solved the issue by doubling his vocals, it created this what would be known as the basis to the psychedelic sound, like the idea of having two of the identical same take phasing against each other creates this really cool chorus effect. And when you add that harmony on it, it just sounds amazing. So that is what to me makes the Beatles so special, and those little things, like, I really love. So take notes on the songs that I brought up. I brought up Hello Goodbye. I brought up Getting Better. Even listen to the Sergeant Pepper, like the first track. With Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It just makes you feel like you're at a circus, or you're at like a cabaret or a show where it's just like, you're just there with the hat and the cane. Like, they really, the thing that makes the Beatles special is they really want to put you inside their songs when you're listening to them. They really want to make you feel as if you're actually in the story, you're actually a part of their music. So, give them a listen and check them out. I would suggest listening to anything off of Sgt. Pepper, anything off of Revolver, because those were really the two albums that they really broke away from being the cover act. The cover act that did Little Richard, Chuck Berry, which is great music, by the way. In fact, Paul McCartney got his style of singing from Little Richard, and you can hear that in the tracks on Abbey Road. Like, for those who have listened to the Beatles, if you ever noticed on Oh Darling, oh darling, please believe me, boo, 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 I'll never do you no harm. You got the harmonies in the back, being very soulful. Believe me when I tell you, I'll never leave me alone. Woo! Like, he got all that style of singing from Little Richard. He openly has admitted that in books and in blogs and all these videos about the Beatles. Like, Little Richard had a huge part to do with the way, not only the Beatles in general played their music, but Paul McCartney specifically, the way he sang. And if you listen to like Abbey Road and Let It Be, you could hear it. You can hear like Paul like hollering and screaming at the top of his lung. And that was something that, Little Richard used to do a lot in his music. So those are the things that to me make the Beatles very special and make them unique from other artists, because, and I'm going to talk about this more next week on Tuesday for Vocal Day. Not everybody is like an Usher. Not everybody is a Beyonce. You can tell a story just by kind of opening your mouth and just having the right background and having the right music and the right setting. And a lot of artists, including John Lennon, kind of fit that criteria, where they're not like trained singers, they're not operatic singers, they're just like kind of giving you their all. They're giving you them, like, and singing their pain to you. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about that and how to incorporate that into our music. And I would say for anyone who's kind of starting off on playing guitar, piano, drums, or singing, or bass, listen to the Beatles and just, try to learn their parts and understand how they sang their parts, because it's really amazing the way they use chords to their advantage in their music. And when I say chords, like harmony chords, like singing in harmony. One of the greatest examples of how awesome the Beatles were at using harmony in their music, because the world is round, it turns me on. Amazing. I believe I read in a book that I have about the way it's a book that breaks down every Beatles song. I think it's like about 400 or 500 pages. That's irrelevant. But that song, Because, was basically John Lennon taking a very famous classical piece and reversing it, because he was with Yoko Ono, and Yoko Ono being a classically trained pianist, and last not a lot. Yoko Ono, by the way, is his wife. You know, she's a Japanese artist from the '60s who is also an activist and a musician and a part of his band after the Beatles. But she's a trained pianist, and they were sitting at home one day, and he was writing a song, or working out the lyrics to a song, and he basically took, I think, Moonlight Sonata and flipped it, all the chords backwards, and played them in sequence backwards on the piano, and it just created this like really amazing story, not story, but an amazing like just vibe throughout this song, and the Beatles, both all three vocalist Beatles, George Harrison, Paul McCartney, and John Lennon, just did this 3-part harmony on Abbey Road that I wish I could just break down now, because it's a lot of notes. But go out and listen to it, and if you can, try to learn how to sing it, because it's just a magical song. It's very beautiful. But on that note, I'm happy to have talked to you guys about this. Thursday, I'm going to be teaching some Beatles songs on guitar. So for those guitar players who are interested in singing and playing, Thursday is the day. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.